also the granddaughter of Abul Bashor Ansari, who was a poet, politician and an activist. Today I wanted to share two poems of my own, but before I did that, as today's topic is on mental health and healing in the British Bangladeshi community, I wanted to talk about some of the previous research I did during my final year of university. So my dissertation was on exploring the attitudes towards mental health in the South Asian community, in the British South Asian community. And what I found was that there was a mental health stigma, and this was more occurring in the older generation. So what usually would happen is that individuals, their mental health issues would be blamed on them. So for example, our community would blame on things like lack of faith, or even possession by jinns, or karma, evil eye, and as a result the person would feel shameful. And because in our community family is such an important aspect, usually a person is a reflection of their family in our community, and therefore what would happen is that the families would feel that same shame and embarrassment, and then the individual would isolate themselves, or their families would isolate them. Instead of seeking help, this would lead to their mental health becoming even worse. So my advice today for the younger generation of British South Asians, or South Asians in general, is as we're more educated on the topic of mental health, it's important that we also try and educate our parents, our aunties, our uncles, and try and make them understand that mental health is not something you should be embarrassed of. It's okay to not be okay. Also, when it comes to things like seeking help, there's nothing wrong with seeking help. In fact, I would also advise anyone, if you're struggling with your mental health in any way, then make sure that you don't suffer in silence. If you repress these negative emotions in your mind, then it could have detrimental impacts in the future. There's several different ways that you can try and heal from these negative emotions. Some of them is to obviously do activities that you enjoy, go to the gym, exercise, do some art therapy, of course try and seek professional help. However, I understand that sometimes it's difficult for people to actually go there and tell a stranger and talk to a stranger and admit to the doctor that they're suffering. So speak to your friends, speak to your family, just don't suffer in silence. So I wanted to mention that in 2018, I went through one of the most difficult times of my life. My granddad, he meant a lot to me. He was diagnosed with cancer, but prior to that, in 2017, in my first year of uni, I lost my Dudley, so my dad's mum, and then in my second year of university, I lost my nanny, so my mum's mum. And then when I found out that my granddad had cancer in my third year of uni, my final year, it took a huge mental toll on me. I began to struggle, and I would feel things like sadness and pain, and I didn't know how to deal with it, I didn't know how to cope. I was actually going to leave university and take a year out because I just couldn't cope. But Allah had other plans for me, and I ended up graduating. During that time, I thought, how do I cope with this? Because these were completely different emotions for me. So one way that I tried to deal with it is through prayer, which was the most powerful thing for me. I'd listen to the Quran, because Quran is medicine for the soul. I'd also speak to friends who were very supportive. My best friend's here with me today, literally supports me throughout everything. Another way that I tried to deal with everything I was going through was through poetry. I actually didn't know that I had this in me. I'd watch my granddad, ever since I was young, he'd have like a notepad and a pen, and he'd always write poems and like try and express himself and make sense of the world, and people would use his poems to kind of heal. But I never really understood it. I used to look at him like, oh, he's bored, like this is boring. But I decided to try it for myself, and I thought, my granddad, when I was born, he wrote a poem for me. So I was like, let me give back to my granddad and give this as a final gift before he passes away, because I had to accept that. So this is the poem I wrote for him, and I'd like to share that with you. The poem is called My Dada, Abul Bashor Ansari. Dada, you're the wisest man I know. To some you're a poet, a politician, a philanthropist, a public speaker, to name a few. But to me, you're a life teacher, a father figure. You taught me that honesty is the best policy. You always say simple living, high thinking. You taught me to never speak without knowledge, because empty vessels speak the most. You taught me to never chase money. Through observation of you, I've learned what true passion for an art is. I've learned what it means to have self-love, self-respect. I've learned to help those less fortunate than me, and to do everything for the sake of the Almighty Allah, not for the sake of people pleasing. You taught me that environment creates man, so thank you for the environment you've raised me in. You've left a legacy for humanity, and that legacy will never die. One thing I really admired about my granddad's character was his fearlessness.